Implementing the steps toward a communist state in Spain and Europe. This list of steps toward a communist state, inspired by Marxist principles such as those set out in Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels' Communist Manifesto, 1848, proposes radical measures to transform society through the centralization of power, the abolition of private property, and sweeping economic and social restructuring. This analysis explores how such measures might be reflected in today's Spain and Europe, allowing for bold speculation beyond the usual constraints, considering possible agendas of global elites such as the World Economic Forum, and drawing on psychological tactics like fear appeals paired with solutions, attitude inoculation, reciprocity, consensus, consistency, and authority to build a persuasive case. It examines each step in the Spain and Europe context, weighing evidence, trends, and speculation about how these policies could be eroding sovereignty, freedoms, and democracy, and warning of potential authoritarian intent. Step 1. Restriction of private property through progressive taxation, high inheritance taxes, abolition of inheritance rights for collateral relatives, forced loans, and so on. Spain. In Spain, the tax system includes progressive taxes such as personal income tax, IRPF, up to 47% for high earners in 2025, and the wealth tax, which levies high-value assets. Inheritance and gift tax varies by autonomous community, but in regions like Catalonia, it can reach 34% on large inheritances. Although there is no explicit abolition of collateral inheritance, Pedro Sanchez's government has proposed tax reforms to increase taxation on the wealthy, justified as social justice. In 2023, a temporary tax on large fortunes was introduced, criticized as a step toward forced redistribution. Speculatively, these measures could align with a globalist agenda to weaken the accumulation of private wealth, promoting increasing state control under the pretext of fairness, as libertarian critics suggest. Europe, in countries like France, a wealth tax of up to 1.5%, and Germany, inheritance taxes of up to 30%. Similar trends can be seen. The European Union has proposed harmonizing inheritance taxes to prevent avoidance, which could restrict indirect or lateral inheritances. The World Economic Forum, with its "You'll own nothing and be happy" message, Davos 2016, may be influencing these policies to shift wealth to the state, laying the groundwork for a centralized economy, though there's no direct evidence of that. Psychological tactic, appeal to fear. These taxes, presented as fairness, could be a first step towards stripping citizens of their property, stoking fear of losing financial autonomy. Step 2. Gradual expropriation of agricultural landowners, manufacturers, railways, and ships with state takeover or compensation. Spain. There haven't been any mass expropriations, but the government has intervened in strategic sectors. In 2021, electricity prices were regulated, affecting private companies, and partial nationalizations have been proposed in areas like housing, rent controls in 2022. The 2023 housing law encourages converting private property into social housing, which critics see as a step toward covert expropriation. These measures could reflect a World Economic Forum agenda to prioritize the common good over private property, aligning with its vision of managed economies. Europe, in countries like the Netherlands, the government has expropriated farmland to meet climate targets, nitrogen emissions reductions, 2022, justified in the name of sustainability. In France, the nationalization of EDF, energy, in 2023 shows state intervention. Speculatively, the World Economic Forum, which promotes the UN's 2030 agenda, could be behind these expropriations, using climate change as a pretext to transfer assets to the state. Psychological tactic, attitude inoculation. By presenting these interventions as sustainability, the audience is primed to question narratives that disguise state control. Step 3. Confiscation of assets from immigrants and rebels against the will of the majority. Spain. There are no explicit confiscations of this kind, but tax persecution of citizens who move their tax residence, for example, to Andorra, has increased, with aggressive audits by the tax agency. Critics claim the government labels opponents as unpatriotic to justify penalties. This could be a precursor to policies that punish those who challenge the state, aligning with a globalist agenda to discourage dissent. Europe and the European Union sanctions on Russian oligarchs after the invasion of Ukraine 2022 included asset seizures justified on security grounds. Although aimed at a specific context, they set a precedent. The World Economic Forum, which supports coordinated global sanctions, could normalize these confiscations as a tool against ideological rebels, according to speculation in libertarian forums. Psychological tactic, appeal to fear. These measures create fear of being punished for dissenting or emigrating, restricting freedom of movement. Step 4. Organizing work on farms, in factories, and in state-run workshops, eliminating competition among workers and enforcing high state-mandated wages. Spain. There are no national workshops, but the rise in the minimum wage, SMI, to $1,134 per month in 2025, and strict labor regulations have increased costs for private companies, encouraging greater state intervention. Public employment programs such as the ERTE furlough schemes during the pandemic show state control over work. These policies could be a step toward a model in which the state sets labor conditions, aligning with the World Economic Forum's vision of guided economies under inclusion. Europe, in countries like Sweden and Germany, state employment programs have expanded, especially in green sectors. The European Union promotes the social economy, funding cooperatives. The World Economic Forum, with its emphasis on stakeholder capitalism, may be shaping a system where work is centralized under state control, reducing business autonomy. Psychological tactic, consensus. These trends, visible across Europe, reinforce the idea that state control of labor is a shared threat. Step 5. Likewise, a mandatory duty to work for everyone until private property is abolished, with industrial armies for agriculture. Spain. There is no compulsory labor, but programs like the Minimum Living Income, IMV, and benefits tied to job training, 2023, create dependence on the state. In agriculture, ecological transition projects encourage state-run cooperatives. Speculatively, these initiatives could be a step toward industrial armies, especially if the World Economic Forum promotes centralized green economies. Europe and the Netherlands, agricultural expropriations have led to proposals for state-run cooperatives. The European Union funds sustainable farming projects that prioritize government control. The World Economic Forum, with its 2030 agenda, could be shaping a system in which agricultural work is centralized, justifying control under the banner of a climate crisis. Psychological tactic, appeal to fear. The idea of a mandatory labor stirs fears of losing personal freedom, putting the audience on alert. Step 6. Centralization of credit and banking under a national bank, shutting down private banks. Spain. There's no shutdown of private banks, but the Bank of Spain and the ECB tightly supervise the sector. The digitization of the euro, proposed for 2026, could centralize financial control. The World Economic Forum, which promotes central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, may be behind this trend, enabling financial surveillance and greater state control. Europe. The ECB is pushing the digital euro, and countries like Sweden are experimenting with state-backed digital currencies. This could be a step toward a system where the state controls all credit, in line with the World Economic Forum's vision of a controlled global economy. Psychological tactic, authority. Look into verifiable ECB trends to bolster the credibility of the analysis. Step 7. An increase in national factories, railways, and ships, bringing uncultivated land under cultivation. Spain. The government has invested in strategic companies, such as Renfe, and green projects like solar farms, often using European funds. These investments could be a pretext to nationalize sectors, aligning with the World Economic Forum's agenda of a centralized green transition. Europe. The European Union is funding green infrastructure projects. Next Generation EU 2021-2026, encouraging greater state control. The World Economic Forum, with its fixation on sustainability, could be shaping these nationalizations to consolidate economic power. Psychological tactic, inoculation, framing the green transition as potential state control, primes the audience to question it. Step 8. Education of all children in state-run institutions, indoctrination, combined with factory work. Spain. Education is mostly public, and the Cela Law 2020 strengthened state control over curricula, limiting the autonomy of private schools. This could align with a World Economic Forum agenda to standardize education, shaping citizens who obediently follow global narratives. Europe. Countries like Finland and Germany prioritize public education, and the European Union promotes unified educational programs. The World Economic Forum may be pushing an education model that prioritizes globalist agendas, such as climate change, over critical thinking. Psychological tactic, appeal to fear. The idea of children being educated by the state stirs fear of indoctrination. Step 9. Construction of large communal palaces for communes that bring urban and rural life together. Spain. There are no communal palaces, but social housing projects, Housing Law 2023, and sustainable urban planning could be precursors. The World Economic Forum, with its vision of smart cities, may be inspiring these initiatives to control populations. Europe. The European Union funds sustainable city projects under the Green Deal. Some theories suggest these could eventually evolve into centralized communes. Psychological tactic, consensus. These trends across Europe reinforce the perception of global control. Step 10. Demolition of unhealthy homes and neighborhoods. Spain. Urban renewal projects, Next Generation EU funds, aim to improve neighborhoods, but sometimes they displace residents. This could be used as an excuse to relocate populations under state control, in line with the World Economic Forum. Europe. Cities like Berlin have similar programs. The World Economic Forum could use sustainability to justify mass displacement. Psychological tactic, appeal to fear. Displacement stokes fear of losing one's home. Step 11. Equal inheritance rights for legitimate and illegitimate children. Spain. The law already recognizes equal inheritance, but it isn't a central issue. It could be a step toward eroding traditional family rights, backed by progressive agendas from the World Economic Forum. Europe. Similarly, in the European Union, the World Economic Forum could promote this to weaken family structures, making social control easier. Psychological tactic, inoculation. Presenting this equality as a possible globalist agenda fuels skepticism. Step 5. Consolidation of all means of transportation under state control. Spain. Renfe and INA are mostly state-owned, and the government promotes green public transport. This could be a step toward total control, aligned with the World Economic Forum's vision of centralized, sustainable mobility. Europe. The European Union is investing in unified transport networks, 10T. The World Economic Forum could be behind it, pushing state control under the banner of sustainability. Psychological tactic, appeal to authority. The analysis suggests that Spain and Europe are adopting measures that, while not explicitly communist, mirror the steps toward a centralized state driven by globalist agendas like those of the World Economic Forum. If you care about the future of your freedom, share this analysis.